Hello, this is Jackie Moore, and today's podcast is on Chapter 7, which is the STP process, where STP stands for Segmentation, Targeting, and Positioning. What you see on this first slide are the learning objectives for this chapter. And by the end of the chapter, you'll want to review this and make sure you can do each of these. There are 3 steps in the STP process, and the metaphor here of the person shooting the arrow into the bullseye is that marketers want to narrowly define the market segments in order to target those that are most receptive to their offering. And once the marketer picks a target segment, they position their product to provide competitive advantage and create a perception among customers in that market so that customers understand why that product has a differential advantage. The definition of segmentation is to divide the total market of customers into distinct segments. The way this division is done is based on customer characteristics that we will come to. After the marketer divides the total market of customers, then the marketer selects one or more segments, and the positioning is based on developing products as well as distribution channels, price strategies, and promotion strategies to meet those segments' needs. Essentially, there are 2 reasons for marketers to go through this process. First of all, marketers like to fish where the fish are. And what this means is if marketers can identify their best prospects for their market offering, their marketing efforts will be more effective in terms of the responsiveness that customers will give to the marketing strategy. For instance, there may be a higher conversion on sales. The efficiency argument for market segmentation is that by targeting distinct groups in the market, the company may be able to focus its marketing expenditures more specifically and actually spend less money. Efficiency typically is the ratio of responsiveness to the dollars spent. It's a measure of productivity. And market segmentation, to the extent that marketers are effective in this, should get more efficient allocations in their budget. The key thing to keep in mind here is that marketers are trying to create groups in the market that have real differences, not only in the choices that the customers in that segment make. Those choices from segment 1 should be different from the choices in segment 2, as well as how customers buy. And if a marketer goes through the segmentation process and doesn't find real differences in customer behavior, then the firm may as well use mass marketing. Again, the objective here is to differentiate groups of customers based on what and why and even how they buy. Step 1 essentially focuses on dividing the total market of customers into subgroups or segments, and there are 3 possible types of variables, sometimes called segmentation bases, to do so. The first segmentation variable are demographic variables. The second is Psychographics, which you should review the definition from Chapter 5 if you don't remember the meaning of psychographics. And a third class of segmentation bases are behavior-based variables that I'll be coming to shortly. The first variables that we'll look at are the demographic variables. And these are the common demographic indicators such as age, gender, stage of the family life cycle, income and social class. Remember, social class includes income, education, and occupation. If you need to review social class from Chapter 5, please do so. Ethnicity is another commonly used demographic variable. And geographic location, specifically area of the country, if we take a U.S. focus, or even zip code. Your book does a very thorough job of describing how demographic variables can be used in the segmentation process. And this is wonderful reading with great examples, and I'm going to have you do the demographic variables on your own. These dovetail very nicely with what was previously covered in Chapter 5, and so I'd like you to view Chapter 5 and 7 as a set in terms of these demographic variables. I would like to focus for a moment on using geography as a way to segment markets. It seems obvious at some level that different areas of the country will actually have needs for different types of products. For instance, we need snowblowers perhaps in Montana, or snow shovels, and those wouldn't be needed in other areas. That different regions of the country have different taste preferences. For instance, Campbell's cheese soup is actually made spicier when it's made for the Southwest compared to when it's made for the Midwest. One of the most useful ways that marketers are segmenting based on geography is something called geodemography. And what we'll be doing in class is I am going to give you an assignment to use the PRISM database, which is organized by zip code, and we'll be using that to do an in-class assignment to understand not only how PRISM couples zip code with demographics, but it also includes a very rich psychographic description of people in each zip code in terms of their media habits, their lifestyles, their hobbies, and different types of product ownership. Another very interesting use of geographic segmentation today is based on mobile marketing, where based on people's location as indicated by their cell phone, ads can be targeted very specifically at the local level. And this local targeting is something that is the next growth frontier both for Google as well as mobile marketing applications. The second group of segmentation variables are psychographic variables. Remember that psychographics stands for values and lifestyles, as well as activities, interests, and opinions. We will be using the SRI website for each of you to complete a questionnaire to develop your typology of your psychographic profile. The most common psychographic data that's used is based on this SRI data, and it's called the VALS framework. You will, as you see on the right-hand side here, take the VALS survey, and based on that survey, I'm going to have you describe what your VALS typology is, as well as whether it resonates with you, and then we'll be focusing on how marketers use this for market segmentation. The third class of variables for segmentation is behavior-based segmentation. Essentially, this variable divides all customers in the market based on how they actually use a specific product. For example, user status is the first behavior-based segmentation variable. One common typology for user status is users versus non-users. And I'm going to give two examples of this so that you understand how marketers use it. Before the Nintendo Wii came out into the marketplace, Nintendo was definitely a distant third in the gaming market compared to PlayStation and compared to Xbox. And in looking at that market, hardcore gamers, following the 80-20 rule, the 20% of gamers that accounted for 80% of the usage in that category, if a company asked them what they wanted in terms of games of the future, they would say things like more realistic gameplay, better ability to shoot 'em up and more blood and guts, faster gameplay. But for non-users of gaming were very put off by the way that the game console worked. The joysticks were not intuitive to them, and non-users weren't interested in more shooting and blood and zombies. So Nintendo did a very nice ethnographic study, thinking about the types of research from Chapter 4, and they asked non-users if they were going to game, what would they want? They would want a more intuitive interface. They would want games that allowed them to do things as a family. And Nintendo used that feedback to develop the Wii. It didn't require a traditional joystick. It was very intuitive. And the games that Nintendo came out with were games that were more inviting to a wider variety of players than just the hardcore gamers. The Wii has been highly successful by any stretch of the imagination, and of course Xbox did ultimately come out with something similar known as Kinect. Another example of segmenting the market based on user or non-user status was done by Coors. Who are the heavy users of beer? Typically, heavy users of beer are young men between the ages of 21 and 33. And the non-users of beer tended to be primarily females. In the 1980s, Coors used this information to try to make a clear malt-based beverage that had fruitier flavors to appeal to the female market. And this product was known as Zima. Some of you may remember it. It was highly successful at the time it was introduced, and it's interesting that it was actually mixed with fruity type drinks, including Jolly Ranchers, for example. That's an example of using user status to segment the market. Another variable based in this category of behavior-based segmentation is the 80-20 rule, where marketers segment by heavy versus light users. I'm sorry for the typo on that page. It should be heavy. And because we've used this so extensively from Chapter 1, I won't review your market statistics here that we went over in terms of some of the various applications of the 80-20 rule. The key point is marketers need to understand who are their heavy users and in developing their market strategies, go after users that have a similar profile as their heavy users. Usage occasion refers to when and how customers use certain products. Watches are a very common product that usage occasion is a nice segmentation variable. Watches are oftentimes used for gift-giving occasions. For example, retirement is a time that watches are given. At least they used to be before we used cell phone for watches. Many of us have watches that we might wear with a suit or for fashion compared to our watches that we might use for athletic training. Another application of usage occasion as a segmentation variable relates to how people think of what beer they might want to drink. If a person is drinking at home with his buddies, he might be real happy with PBR. If he's going out on a date, he might actually order a craft beer. So that shows how usage occasion affects customer choice. Benefit segmentation is a different color on your slide with an asterisk, where the asterisk means not in your textbook. This is a very important variable of behavior-based segmentation. Let's think for a minute about product proliferation at the point of purchase. Say that 5 times fast. Product proliferation at the point of purchase. Why would Coke have regular Coke, Coke Zero, Diet Coke with cherry, lime Coke, vanilla Coke? Oh my God, there are so many different kinds of Coke, and you can think the same about Tide detergent. And the fact is, companies know that different customers in the market seek different attributes or benefits when they buy products. And as marketers have more variety in their product line, they're more likely to reach a greater number of more and more precise segments. Now the trade-off here is that to what extent does that product proliferation result in cannibalization in the product line, where a person who maybe used to drink Diet Coke is now drinking Coke Zero? The question is, did the company grow their total market share, or did they just swap share for one product versus another? We'll get a little bit into the cannibalization issues when we get into product management in Chapter 8 and 9. But in the meantime, suffice it to say that most companies know that as they add product variety, they're actually able to better meet the needs of more market segments and ultimately grow their share in the marketplace. There's one example in your book of this behavior-based segmentation, and essentially it deals with orange juice. Do you want orange juice with pulp? Do you want it light? Do you want it with calcium? That would be another example. Your book has great examples, by the way, of these variables. We'll be doing an in-class assignment to segment the market so that you understand how to use step 1. We'll be segmenting consumer markets, but the fact is marketers also segment business markets. There are a different set of variables that are used to segment business markets. For example, organizational demographics, sometimes called firmographics, include things like firm size, whether it's number of employees or sales. And another commonly used variable to segment B2B markets is the North American Industrial Classification System, NAICS. When I do a consulting project, I frequently use this variable to understand which customers the company that I'm working with is targeting, and I can use this industry classification system to pull up articles on those customers as well as market data. If you're interested in B2B markets, my high technology marketing class focuses primarily on B2B. Once a company has segmented the market, then it goes into step 2. And what you'll see here in step 2, there are 3 distinct phases of step 2 targeting. First, the firm has to evaluate the market segments, and I'm going to give you the specific criteria that a company uses in that evaluation of attractiveness. Then the company develops segment profiles, which essentially are a rich description of a typical customer in each segment, who they are, why they make the choices they make, where they live, what their lifestyle is like. And this rich understanding of a typical customer in each segment helps a firm from a market research perspective to really get into the mind and life of those customers. And finally, after looking at the criteria and the segment profiles, a company actually chooses a specific targeting strategy. There are 4 specific targeting strategies that we'll be coming to in a moment. I'll end podcast 1 at this point.